There are reports that indicate that Amazon, you know Amazon, it's that multinational technology and e-commerce giant. Well, they're now pursuing regulatory approval to build their first African satellite gateway, and they want to do this in Kenya. So, should Amazon be successful in this endeavor, what this will do is effectively challenge Starlink's growing presence on the continent. It's a move that comes as demand for high-speed internet grows across the continent, where millions remain underserved by traditional broadband networks. Let's dissect this further this evening and find out whether Amazon can realistically catch up to the strides that Starlink has already established on the continent. They really have had a head start in this endeavor. For this conversation, we're joined by Jan Vermeulen, editor of My Broadband. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
So is this to have been expected, or is this kind of coming from left field? Amazon really big as far as e-commerce is concerned, now going the satellite route?
No, it's not surprising. That's surprising. We knew that this was in the works. It was previously called Project Kuiper, and it's been in the works for a while now. What is surprising is the order in which the rollout is happening on the continent. So they've applied for regulatory approval in Nigeria and Kenya. So the race is on between East and West Africa to see who gets the first Earth stations built from Amazon. And then notably, South Africa absent, even though we've got tremendous infrastructure in South Africa to support internet and broadband technology and earth stations and all that stuff. But we've not heard any reports locally of Amazon applying for regulatory approval to put down an earth station or any other infrastructure in South Africa.
Well, let's look at South Africa's policy and requirements. Would Amazon confront and find themselves in the same position that Starlink found themselves in, as far as not having enough of an equity stake, BEE requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. And so they would be faced with the same conundrum that Starlink is faced with, which is you either comply with local ownership laws in South Africa, or you find some kind of alternative. So in other words, well, you comply, right? So the one way to comply is direct compliance. You have a 30% equity stake by historically disadvantaged groups, or you go via middleman, and the middleman holds your license and you operate via the middleman. Those are really the two routes to market in South Africa. There's other regulatory complexities in the country. There's no real new network and operating licenses being issued. You have to buy one, and each one costs R1 million or more. And you have to buy two. You have to buy the infrastructure license and the service license, and then you can apply for the spectrum licenses. So there's that kind of complexity in the South African market as well. But yeah, absolutely, Amazon Leo would face that exact same question. And then the question becomes, most countries, when it comes to local ownership laws, they have clauses in that say that if you comply with local ownership regulations anywhere else in the world, you must comply with them here. And so it becomes quite a conundrum for multinationals like Starlink and like Amazon Leo, because if they comply with local ownership regulations in one place, like let's say South Africa, then that could affect their agreements everywhere else on the continent.
That's a very interesting one to look at, especially when it relates to Canal Plus, for example, and its operations here. But that's an issue for another day. Let's look at the satellite gateways and exactly how they affect and impact the quality of internet as well as pricing on the African continent.
Yeah, so satellite gateway, I'm not sure what the direct correlation to price might be necessarily, but it improves performance tremendously. And so how these new modern low Earth orbit satellites work is they transmit data between each other via laser, but it must come back down to Earth to connect to the servers on the Earth. All the data centers, the whole internet is hosted on the planet. We don't have any of that infrastructure in space. And eventually, obviously, you have to communicate down to your customer who's on the surface of the planet with the dish pointing up at the sky. But yeah, the if you have a local Earth station to communicate to customers that customers can communicate with, that shortens the latency and improves the performance of your link tremendously. And so everywhere where everything that's going to be close to an Earth station, in short, will have just a better experience on the network. Latency, I think a good way to describe that is if you are on Google, for example, and you type a question, the time it takes for you to press enter and get a response, that's the latency. And when you are communicating via satellite in space versus, say, fiber in the ground, your latency is much higher just because you have to communicate much further up into space, then around to where you're going to fetch the data and then back again. And so that physical distance increases the latency, and Earth stations help reduce that.
Jan Vermeulen, thank you so much for taking us through that. He is the editor of My Broadband. So Nigeria and Kenya, those two eyed by Amazon. And I just wonder if this is perhaps the beginning of a broader space infrastructure race on the African continent between global tech giants. Well, we'll wait and we'll see. That's how we come to the end of today's edition of Africa in Business on Channel Africa.